Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a problem that I recently ran across and how I solved it. So recently I wanted to engrave some tumblers using my laser, but the tumblers had a logo on them. And I was actually really confused about how I was going to avoid the logo when I was doing my engraving. The last thing I wanted was for my engraving to go right over the top of the logo. I thought that would look really terrible. And so I had to work out a way to be able to engrave my tumbler while knowing where that logo is, where to put it in my machine, how to do my design so that it would actually engrave around my logo and not on top of it. This video is going to be sort of an exercise. Every tumbler is going to be a different size, every image is going to be different, and every laser has a different process for using something like a rotary tool. So I'm going to show you what I did just for this particular tumbler, and then you should be able to extrapolate what you need to do based on your own parameters. For this project, I'm going to be using the RA2 rotary tool in my X-Tool S1. I have a video on how to use that tool in my machine, and I'll go ahead and link to that. If you have never used the rotary tool in your machine before, go ahead and watch that video first. I'm not going to go into all of the intricacies of how to use that tool in this video. This is mostly going to be a sort of tech video, but so if you need to learn how to use that tool, watch that video first. For this project, I'm going to be using X-Tool Creative Space. Now, my preference would actually be to do this in Adobe Illustrator. I am an Illustrator girl. I am most comfortable in Illustrator, but I wanted to use a free program to show you how to do it. If you are using a different type of laser, so maybe you have a WeCreate or something like that, you are going to need to sort of translate what I'm doing here into the software. It's not going to be that difficult. You're going to sort of get the idea of what I'm doing, but just know that I'm using the Creative Space from X-Tool, and if you have a different machine, you're going to need to rework the tutorial just a little bit. So this is the particular hydro flask tumbler that I'm working with, and here is my example, and you can see here that it has two logos, right? So both of these have those two logos. We have sort of the larger word mark logo here on the front, and then we have sort of an icon at the top. Now, whether or not you have a 40-ounce Stanley tumbler that has Stanley across the top, or if you have a different size with a different logo, this tutorial should work. You're just going to have to sort of translate it for whatever you have. I thought this would be a really good example because I have two logos that I'm working with, and I was able to do a full wrap design around this tumbler without going over the logos. If you are buying a design, which is very common, especially a lot of people don't create laser files, they buy them. So if you are buying a design for, let's say, a 40-ounce Stanley tumbler, there is usually a place for that logo inside the file. So there will be a blank space where you need to line up the logo. And if that's you, you can go ahead and skip this first part where I'm sort of designing my own file, and you can just go to the part where I lay this out in my machine. You should be able to use sort of the tips and tricks I have in this video to make sure that that blank part of the design goes right over where the logo is so that your tumbler turns out perfectly. You can also use this tutorial if you want to engrave something opposite of the logo. This is actually how I first ran into this problem. I had a client and he wanted, I think 15 water bottles with his logo. Well, I didn't want to put the logo anywhere close. Like I didn't want it just on the side here. I wanted it basically opposite of the logo here. So I had to figure out by using the tips and tricks in this video how to get that logo in the correct place. And I was able to do it and they turned out great. So as you can see, there are a lot of ways that you might be able to use this tutorial, different parts of this tutorial, different machines. One of the things also is that my X-Tool S1 uses this pinpoint positioning system instead of a camera. So if you're using a camera, it's going to look a little bit different. This is basically an exercise to get you thinking. How can you use the tips and tricks and things I do in this video to make it work for your particular project? All right, in the overhead view here, we're going to start by measuring our tumbler. So I'm going to leave the lid on just so it doesn't roll around. I've got my tumbler here, and the first two measurements you're going to want to get are the height and the circumference. And you can see here that my tumbler sort of has a little bit of a curve at the top. I just want basically the area of the flattest part of the tumbler. I don't want to engrave up here. I just want to engrave that flat area. So I'm going to measure my tumbler here, and it is about 6.25 inches high. So that is how tall my tumbler is. Then I'm going to get the circumference of my tumbler as well. Let's see here, I've got my thing upside down, and you can see that my tumbler is 9¼ inches around. Write down these measurements because you're going to need them in a minute. Now we're going to measure the size of our two logos as well as how far they are away from the bottom and the top of this tumbler. So let's take a look here. So the word mark logo here is 1/4 inches wide, and it is 2¼ inches tall. My little snowflake logo here it's really like 5/8 of an inch wide, so 0.625, and it is about 3/4 of an inch tall. And then I want to measure the distance between each of these and the top and bottom. So this top one here is about 3/4 of an inch from the top, and the bottom one here is about 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. Once you have all of those measurements written down, we're going to basically draw ourselves a little sketch of a template. All right, so you can see here that I have basically drawn out what I just measured. I have my height at 6.25 inches, and then I have my circumference at 9.25 inches. This is basically the engravable area. Then I have my two logos, and again, this does not need to be neat or super accurate, but this logo here, like I said, is 2.25 inches tall by 1/4 of an inch wide. This one up here is 3/4 of an inch tall by 5/8 of an inch wide. And then I have them at 0.75 inches from the top and bottom. Once you have your little sketch, again, it doesn't need to be super accurate, you just need to know kind of your measurements. We can go ahead and translate this into Xtool Creative Space. Here in Xtool Creative Space, we're going to start by saying we're going to process it using the rotary attachment. And this will sort of change the shape of our canvas. I also like to zoom out to make sure that it fits in my whole screen. If you're using the Xtool S1 or the Xtool M1 Ultra, it has this red cross, and that basically tells me where the laser head is. So other programs will have a camera and you'll be able to see it. This one actually just tells me where my laser is to let me know where I need to place my project. So again, if you are working with something that has a camera, you're going to have to change this up just a little bit to be able to figure out how you're going to do it with the camera versus this pinpoint positioning system I have with my Xtool. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw that big rectangle that is the size of our engravable area. So I'm going to click rectangle, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle. Then over here on the right, I can change the size. So I want to make sure that my dimensions are unlocked here. And then I'm going to change it to be 9.25 inches wide by 6.25 inches high. Now this is the size of my engravable area. Then I need to create additional rectangles to add for my two logos. So I'm going to create another rectangle. This one's going to be kind of a tall, skinny one. Go over here, make sure to unlock it. The width is 0.25 and the height is 2.25. And I'm just going to drag this down here, sort of where it is, but we'll get closer here in a minute. I'm going to draw another box for my other logo, which is kind of a rectangle box. Unlock. This one is 0.625 by 0.75 by 0.75. And again, I'm just gonna sort of drag that onto my design here. And now I'm going to zoom in a little bit more just so we can see what we're working on here. I'm going to draw two more boxes that are basically going to tell us how far away each of these needs to be from the top and bottom. So like I said, when I was doing my measurements, they were each about 3/4 of an inch from the top. So I'm just gonna create myself a little box here that's 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. Again, make sure to unlock it. I'm doing 0.75 by 0.75. And we're gonna put that right in the center at the top. Then we can put this right below it and line it up. Then I'm going to copy this one because it's the same for mine on top and bottom. Again, it may not be the same on yours, so make sure to do your own measurements. I'm gonna drag it down here, put it in the middle, and place it. Then I can place this right on top of it. So now we have our engravable area and we know where our two logos go. I want to select the whole thing, and for this project, I am going to center align everything here. You can actually put these 4 elements anywhere along this line and it will still work. But just to make it easy, I am going to center everything. Now we have our template. So I can delete our little spacer pieces here at the top and bottom, and I have exactly where my two logos are. So I'm gonna select everything. Now, because of the way that my Xtool works, I need to rotate this 90 degrees. So I'm gonna hold down the Shift key and rotate it. And that is because if I zoom out here, the way that this works is the top of my tumbler is going to be over here on the right, and the bottom of my tumbler is over here on the left, and it engraves like this. So I do have to rotate it. Again, this might be different for your particular laser. And then I'm gonna drag the whole thing up here. Now I'm going to go put my water bottle in my laser, and I'm going to align my laser head at the top of my water bottle, basically where I want the engraving to start, and centered with the logo. So again, if you're using a camera, you'll have to eyeball it, but it should work basically in the same way. But I want to make sure that I'm lining that up with this logo, because we're going to line the logo up with the red X that is inside Creative Space. So I'm going to take off my lid, I'm going to walk over to my laser, I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Now I know exactly where my laser head will start in relation to what I have on my screen. So back here in Creative Space, I'm going to select my design and I'm going to put it basically centered along with this little cross piece. That arrow is at the center of my tumbler with the logo right below it. So if you kind of imagine it in your head, you can see that I have the two logo pieces here. And this is the image that will engrave all along my tumbler. From here, you can add your design. So what I did was I actually just uploaded a bunch of little leaves and I placed them everywhere. I worked my way around my logos and I actually already have the finished version over here in another window. So you can see here that I have another version and I have all of my little leaves here. Everything is a separate vector graphic right now, but I have worked around the two places where my logo will live. You'll also notice that for this design, I do have a couple of leaves at these are actually the sides because I have it rotated 90 degrees that go off the end. And that is because this leaf right here will tuck up into this space I have right here. This right here will tuck right in there. This leaf here will fit right in here. This leaf here will fit right in here. This is one of my favorite techniques so you don't have a big gap at the back. It does take some practice and I have definitely messed it up, but it is a really great way to not have that sort of really obvious, oh, this is where my design ended. So you can see here that if I spin it around, I don't really have an obvious place of where my design ends and where it started. So we have the back right here, and yeah, there are some slightly larger gaps, but overall I'm really happy with how this turned out. Nothing engraved over itself, which is always the fear and how I've messed it up in the past. So that is something you might want to play with when you're doing designs like this, is being able to create sort of a seamless pattern by having those pieces outside of the bounding box. Just make sure that on the opposite side, so if you have leaves going out the top, that you have the space for them at the bottom of your design. All right, we know that our laser head is right here, so I'm going to grab everything and I'm going to place this at the laser head. Now you might think I want to place it with this top one here, but you can see that that's actually the bounding box for some of these big leaves here. Our engraving size is this interior piece here, so I'm actually going to move it up just like that. And for mine, this is the one I did earlier. This doesn't actually have, this one isn't quite centered, so I do have it just slightly off-centered. If you have it centered, make sure it's centered, but this one is just off-center, so I'm not redoing all these leaves. We're gonna go with it as is, and I've just slightly off-centered it from the middle of my bounding box. It is, however, centered with my logos. I hope you can see that. All right, so now we can delete our box here, and we can delete our little boxes here because we don't want those to engrave or score. And then we can select everything here, and we can click combine here. We're gonna unite everything into one solid piece. The next step is to set in the easy panel our parameters. So I have done a lot of tumblers, and I have found this to be a fairly reliable set of parameters. I'm going to go with 60 power, 400 speed, and I'm going to use 180 lines per inch. Then the last thing we need to do is measure the distance. So over here, this measures the distance between the laser head and our water bottle. In some other programs, this might be called focusing or auto-focusing. So whatever step you need to do here to get this to focus properly, you can do that. I'm going to click this little ruler to do that. And it has set my distance. That's it. I'm going to go to process. Here it will give you an overview of how it's going to engrave your project. Then I'm going to click start. When your engraving is done, you'll go ahead and wash off any charring. I really like using a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser for that. It does really well. And you can see that we completely missed the logo with this design. Now, as you can tell by this tutorial, that it was very specific to this design, my particular laser, and this particular tumbler. So again, no matter what you're using, you're going to have to switch things up. If you have any questions about the process here, I would be happy to walk you through that. So go ahead and leave those down in the comments. If you found this video helpful and you were able to engrave around a logo, I would love to hear it, and I would love to get a like for this video.